Hey, you guys. Thank
Hey,
you for coming. It's
oh,
good to see everybody. Georgie,
hey, Ari. How
there
you
you
doing,
are.
buddy?
I almost had to get out my magnifying glass so I could see which square you were in. Good to see you, Guy. Look at I'm reading these names while people are getting ready. I recognize so many people here. It's really nice to see so many familiar faces and people who I don't know that I've met you, but
I,
I know their names.
I, I, I'm really impressed, Ari, with how many people are on here.
I know.
You
We've
know,
got a there's a lot of enthusiasm for this.
I thought there would be 13 people total.
Well, I paid some people to show up so that you'd feel better about getting out of bed for this.
Yeah.
No, no, there's so much interest in helping the kind of the younger generation, which makes me really happy. That's
Yeah.
it. And I also, my inspiration, well, we'll start, you guys. So I'm Erika Bugbee. This is George Pransky, mid-yawn.
Yeah.
George and I were business partners for 20 years. And I went off and started my own practice, but we worked side by side for 20 years, myself, Linda Pransky, and Kara Stambach in a family practice. So George's doubles as my dad. And he's also was the person responsible for a huge amount of what I understand about what I'll be talking to you guys about today. And part of the inspiration, most of the inspiration behind doing this is because, George and I have worked together. I ended up seeing a lot of Kara and I ended up seeing a lot of the younger people that came through our practice over the years. And we would work with families. We'd work with parents. So parents would come out with their teens or young adults. And so we would work together. So we would work separately with the younger people, but then we would come together periodically and sort of, help them work things out. And George really has a gift for talking to younger people in a way that is disarming to them. It brings something out brings out a really different side of them. And he's like that. I have kids, my sister has kids. It's like that with our kids. He was like that with us. So part of this is there's things that I want you guys to be able to hear from him. And so I thought, well, rather than tell him what he should do a webinar on, I figured, well, I'll do one together and I'm going to draw out of him what I love so much in seeing him, but also show you what I've seen over the years from my angle of things. And so we're gonna kind of share, the two of us can cover a lot of ground on this topic. We've been doing it for so long. So what we'll do is George and I, sometimes there's webinars like this and sort of presentation style. This is going to be more George and I sitting around a couch talking about our craft, and sharing, what we love and what we see. And then you guys can be part of that. So it's going to be more discussion and exploratory. And some of what we talk about is from what our preparation and ahead of time. And some of it will just come out of our discussion. And then later in the session, we'll take questions. We'll only take questions in the chat. So if you have questions, type them in so we don't end up with background noise. You can type them in anytime you want, but we'll take questions at the end. We'll read questions off of there. So
I guess we would say, Ari, that our position is bystanders.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah, we really like that position of being bystanders.
Right.
We can hear what's going on, but we're also in a position to reflect on what's going on.
Yeah, a lot of what the point we're going to make today is there's really two bigger points that we want to get across. One is we're going to talk about, we're going to paint a picture of what an adolescent's world is like, the side of their world that they'll sit down and share with us once they trust us and they're comfortable with us. Because it's crazy in there. An adolescent's world is, it's unlike anything anyone else is looking at. And it's really hard to tell from the outside, or you misinterpret what's going on in there because there's so much hostility or shut down. So we really want to paint a picture of how turbulent and chaotic it is in there. And partly, our other point we want to make is how much tone matters, your tone.
Yeah.
And so those are things we want to hit on, and they're a little bit hard to describe. So we'll kind of we'll talk about them here. To start, I wanted to, one of the first things that George and I talked about, and what do we want to get across to you guys, what we've learned in our 20 years, is that teenagers really come across as being very standoffish. They come across as, often, not all the time, but a lot of them come across, especially the more troubled ones, is that their body language and their actual language is saying, get away from me, leave me alone. I want nothing to do with you. I don't like you. There's either hatred or hostility, or they're attacky, or they just, they're shut down and uncomfortable. And so what comes out of them is a signal that says, I want to be left alone. And what we find is that, partly we'll talk about tone later, but when we're not put off by that, and we're looking for, are there openings? Is there a way in which they do want help? Is there something that I can provide? Not pushing ourselves on them, but when we sort of are respectful of the fact that they don't want to be poked and prodded, but we're still interested and we have goodwill, and that we're wanting to be of service, we find there's always a part of them that really wants desperately somebody to understand where they're coming from. There's a part of them, even though they're saying get away from me, that is dying for somebody to get what they're up against. Because usually they're up against so much that they can't even articulate it.
Yeah.
You know, when you're struggling with, everything blows up at once, and you're struggling with so many different things, and someone asks how it's going, and you can't even form a sentence long enough to capture enough of it. That's sort of what their lives are like. So we want to give you a glimpse of what you would see if you hung in there with the really troubled, surly ones, what their lives are like inside. Georgie, do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
Well, why don't you start, Gary?
Great, and then you chime in.
Yeah, and I'll feel comfortable chiming in.
Right. So there's several themes that we noticed in most of the young people that we work with, and we notice it in even the young people around us that aren't struggling, just our kids and our kids' friends. That's a little bit different than adults. One of those themes in young adults and teens is that in the adolescent world, they take life really seriously. Like we understand that, because there's things that we understand we take really seriously. We can get intense about money, or our marriage, or our parenting. adolescents typically take everything seriously. They have no idea what is a big deal and what's not. So everything's a big deal. Everything's a big deal. So everything that happens to them, if they feel jealous of somebody, they have a friend that, has it together in school more, is easier socially, easier going, doesn't have anxiety. That is something they sort of will obsess about. Not just when the person's around, but all the time.
Well, Ari, one thing that you could say about the teens is they bear down on life.
Right.
Right. That's what characterizes they bear down on life.
Yeah, they do. Everything looks like a problem, everything looks like a big problem. And in addition, every problem that they think about, they approach they sort of white knuckle it and drive right into it.
Yeah.
They sort of, they're all in with everything they do, and problems is one of those things. So I remember being a teenager and listening to the same song over and over again. I still do that, but getting really obsessed with songs and bands, and they get obsessed with whatever the problem they're having. And it doesn't matter that it's Christmas or it's Sunday morning and they have all day. If they're at the store, that's exactly it. They don't, all of their problems feel like a midlife crisis to them.
Yeah.
Every single one. And it's something that they don't, you're right, Georgie, they don't seem to discriminate.
Yeah.
Big problems from little problems. If it's a problem, it's a big problem. They just have one file, the big file problem.
The problem file.
Yeah, there's not 5 levels. There's just one level.
Yeah.
And they don't, so they're essentially consumed 100% of the time. They sort of jump from fire to fire. So if you ask them, once you get in with them and you ask, well, tell me what's going on, and you ask them about something that seems like maybe it's a little more benign and easier for them to talk about. Oh, so you play basketball, and they'll immediately get really intense about, yeah, the coach put me on JV because he says I'll get more playing time. They get, all of a sudden they go 0 to 60, and they don't even really like basketball, but they're sort of, anything that could upset them does upset them. And they, you know what it's like. I was lucky enough to get to take a trip to Africa a few years back, and they have these puff adder snakes there, these really deadly snakes. And we saw one crossing the road. It was just a little guy, and I'm into baby anything, and so I want to stop and take pictures of it. And it's so funny because he'd drive right up to other kinds of snakes, but this little tiny guy, our Jeep stays way back on the road. And I said, well, can I get in to get a picture? So he was moving really slow. And he said, the babies are far more dangerous. I guess this is all snakes. Babies are far more dangerous than the adult snakes because they don't regulate the amount of venom.
Yeah.
They just kind of use all of it, and then they're exhausted for 3 days. So the other snakes are going out to play, and this one's exhausted. They kind of have to learn from experience of, the adults sort of learn how to, regulate. And teenagers, they just do that with everything. They use up all their energy on every campaign.
Yeah, they're all in. That's what they do. They do.
Yeah. they do everything like that. But then that's why they have so much fun.
Yeah.
You could see teenagers will sit on the same street corner every weekend
Yeah.
and nothing's happening, and yet they're laughing and goofing around. So they're all in with everything they do. So when it comes to enjoying things, they only have one file. The things they do, they really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And then the problems that they have, they're all in with those. So what that means is that while they're navigating the same ups and downs and their moods and sort of their spiritual energy going up and down all day like it does, when they're down, they are really down. They're like a level 10 for us. So it's half, if not 80% of their world is they're getting eaten alive by a stack of problems, and next week it's going to be a different stack of problems.
Yeah.
That they're getting eaten alive by. So that's two of the how seriously they take things and how intense they get about each thing. The other thing that they do is that they take everything really personally. So if their parents are fighting, that's personal. They don't care about me. I'm being difficult and now they're fighting. They sort of either feel victimized or shame
Yeah.
about everything that happens to them, everything that's happening around them. They're masterful at taking it on themselves. Their mind just does it so fast that they have no space. So everything that goes wrong, their mind immediately goes to, how does this affect me?
Yeah.
How does that affect me?
What is that? What does that say about Erika Pransky?
Exactly. What
How
is
does
that?
how is Erika Pransky going to relate to that?
Right. And how am I going to look
Yeah.
given this? So like, I remember one time I had somebody that didn't get back to me, which happens like several times a week. You don't hear from somebody until a day or two later. For some reason, my mind went, had this big reaction to it. I don't know, I think I was maybe in my late 20s. My mind had this big reaction like, it's because I don't follow through fast enough on things. Nobody takes me seriously. I'm kind of just 3/4 on everything in my life. I started questioning everything, and everything looked like it pointed back to me not really cutting it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I went there so fast, and funny, as I checked my spam folder, and the email was sitting in my spam folder. So she had gotten back to me, but I went there so fast, just in the time it took me to check my spam folder. And we do that when we're particularly down on things, when we're in a funk, when we're already kind of sour and things are going on. They're always in a funk. They do that about everything. It's right under the surface. That's waiting to happen with whatever event. So if they go out to dinner and they get sat the table closest to the baby, crying baby at the next table, they're like, oh, I always have to sit here. Everybody else is more important than me.
Why me?
Why me? The universe only puts babies next to me at restaurants. I remember thinking that as a teenager. So they really they look for what does this say about me in my life? Everything that happens to them. So it it creates just not only a, you know, a feeling that they're being tormented, but it creates incredible fatigue. So they're just sort of spent and exhausted and low a lot, or they're agitated and tense a lot, because it's sort of a lifestyle. It'd be like if we ran everywhere for an hour. The other thing that we talked about is that they, in addition to taking everything personally, they don't really understand how to, let me see how to say this. They have difficulty creating kind of a feeling of homeostasis.
Yeah.
They don't know how to just be in neutral. They don't really know how to reset themselves yet. They sort of have two, they're kind of, they have two states. They're either having a good time, doing whatever they want to do, relaxing with their friends, or they're really, really low or angry or agitated. They don't really know how to come back to home base.
Yeah.
We sort of, we didn't, you know, most of us didn't know that. We had to sort of learn how to go kind of clear our heads, reflect on things, see what to do next. They don't really understand how to do that. So the way that they solve their problems oftentimes is they go from either being really agitated to just, I got to get away from this feeling, and they go hang out with their friends or they play video games. They just get into sort of a social state or a leisure state. They don't really have a, if their mind gets to a resting state, everything closes in on them. They don't really have a resting state. That's one of the things that I noticed when we work with teenagers. It's so, I don't appreciate how much we provide for them, and that we're sort of a resting state for them.
Yeah.
Because we'll talk about things, you know, draw them out, we get interested, we get them to reflect. It's kind of, so often the only calm they have, they're either agitated or excited. So there's sort of a state that we bring them into that they don't spend a lot of time there. You have anything, Georgie, you want to add to what we're talking about here?
You know, what I wanted to add, Ari, is I don't think people can appreciate how much solace when people are in their well-being, when people are in their well-being, and I don't think, I think it's easy to forget just how much that matters to a teenager.
Right.
I don't think they can realize how much of a difference it makes when when people have a when adults have a homeostasis,
Right.
that they can come back to.
Right. Right.
So that's the other side of it, is people or kids are quick to get into that homeostasis.
Right.
So they really are quick to adjust. And
right. Yeah, it's interesting. Little kids will get, you know, reflective. If you
Yeah,
put a little kid at a party, for example, and you sit them down at the dinner table next to some random adult, uh, they'll they'll kind of hang out with them. They'll watch them. They'll get interested. They'll comment on what they're doing. If the person asks them a question, they just speak from the heart. They're kind of they have the ability to sort of have their mind be open and at rest. All teenagers lived in that state up
yeah,
until they were 7 or 8, and
yeah,
they learned how to use their free will and think about things that aren't happening right now. And you fast forward that same kid a couple years, you put them at a party, and they have no idea how to just be at a party just with them. They're they're thinking about themselves. It's like stuck to their face. So if you look at most teenagers at a party, there's a whole life happening on their face and in their
yeah,
head
yeah,
that's at the party too. It's like a roommate. It's like a clingy roommate. So they don't have a sitting at rest state. In fact, that's one of the things that I love about teenagers is they simply will not sit idle in their rooms because their minds will eat them alive. So they look for anything they can to get themselves out of it.
yeah,
They understand I cannot let that thing close in on me. So they they do anything that they can to get themselves out of it. Now, parents don't always want them doing the things that they're doing, but they won't let that. They would otherwise implode if they just sat there and let that happen. So it's the 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 teenage mind it's it kind of the a resting state is it's like a foreign country to them.
yeah,
And now the thing that is remarkable about teenagers is that if you bring them a resting state, if
yeah,
if you're relaxed and if they connect with somebody that's relaxed, if they have somebody that's with them, hanging out with them, that's relaxed themselves, calm themselves, they'll they let that person in, their minds will calm down.
yeah, absolutely.
So they're very sort of mood states are very contagious to
Yeah,
teenagers if if you can. And that's what we're going to talk about tone here in a minute. If you're not put off by their get away from me manner,
yeah, yeah,
if you're not scared off by their packaging. So I was saying yesterday, last night, George and I were talking about this, that when I was a teenager, there were people that they'd get mad at the teachers that would get frustrated with me in class, but then they were nice to me in the hall. They didn't hold a grudge. They were open with me once they got done being mad at me, and they treated me just like everybody else in the hall. And I was more open with them
yeah, yeah,
because they were open with me. So their neutrality towards me rubbed off on me. So around those teachers, my head would clear. I'd feel relaxed and open, and I'd walk in that classroom of one of those teachers who was my PE teacher, who was also my history teacher, because that's what we do here in public school. Everyone teaches everything. And as soon as I walked into Mr. Nielsen's class, he would my head would clear. I'd stop thinking about myself, and I'd go and hang out with him and help him organize his desk, or you know talk to him. It was the only place that I could find a resting state. I didn't know how to
yeah,
do it on my own.
yeah,
So you're right, Georgie. They don't really they get so, they spend so much time being frightened and ashamed and embarrassed or scared about, insecure about life and themselves and everything that's going on around them, that they sort of, they get out of shape
Yeah.
of having their minds just being open and doing nothing, being in a reflective state, being in a, just being relaxed and not doing anything. They just, they kind of forget how to do that.
But yes, that's the thing, is young kids are so resilient that uh, they pick up on energy really fast. So if you're relaxed, they'll recognize it.
Right.
They'll respond to it. It's the same way if you're not relaxed, they'll respond that too.
Mm-hmm.
So it really makes a difference, your tone.
Yeah, let's talk about that now. So, and I'm gonna use my own example, an example of how I was as a teenager, so I can kind of show you what the inside of this looks like and what went through my mind. Because one of the things that happened for me is I was a really, some of you might have heard this before, but I was a very stable little kid, and then I turned into a very unstable teenager, and I was, primarily because in my community of people, it was all people that learned the principles that we're talking about here and taught it. Everybody was very warm and stable, and everybody around me,
And
uh,
high-minded.
high-minded, high-spirited. Everybody was
Yeah.
just light and friendly and open. It was a really nice community until you woke up one day as kind of a basket case or
Yeah.
dysfunctional, or
Yeah.
and then it was you felt like you were on an island by yourself because you didn't know anybody that that had feelings of hatred or had that look on their face. I felt hatred for no reason. I just felt agitated and irritable, and everybody annoyed me, and then I was angry, and I didn't know what was happening to me. And but one of the things that would happen is I would hear a sharp tone come out of my mouth, or a look, or I wouldn't be able to contain myself, and then I would feel really bad about myself,
Yeah.
or I'd feel bad about them for putting me on the spot and making me say something that I, you know, in a way that then I have to feel bad about. So I but one of the things that was interesting is that in that era when went from being really easygoing to very troubled and having no idea how to handle it, is the people like George, my dad was this way, he was not at all put off or frightened by this sort of strange creature I had turned into overnight. It was as if he read the schedule that was on the
Yeah.
schedule. It's like, oh, here it is. It's an hour early. He was completely not, it's like he'd seen the movie before. He was not at all put off by it. He wasn't offended, and he wasn't um, hurt by it, even though he and I had been really close. We were,
Yeah.
you know, we
We
were,
was thick as thieves.
yeah, we were best friends.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I wouldn't talk to him. I didn't want to be looked at. I was very shut down. I didn't talk. I didn't say things anymore. I didn't come into the kitchen and hang out. I'd heel walk through the kitchen and then go into my room. But every once in a while, I'd come out and, or I'd be eating dinner and I'd sit there, surly and in my head, and he'd be relaxed. And, if I looked talkable, he'd talk to me.
Yeah.
It seemed like I wanted to be left alone, he'd leave me alone. But as soon as I came out and would, sit and watch something with them, come into the TV room, he'd talk to me as if nothing terrible had just happened. And he didn't. It was really interesting because I was used to having people say or think, what's wrong with this person?
Yeah, yeah.
That was the sort of landscape that I'd gotten used to, and he wasn't like that. And I think a lot of people that know that I was troubled, for example, assume that he sat down and talked to me about thought. And we did have a short conversation at one point, but what affected me and what made me hopeful enough to reach out and get help was the fact that he wasn't scared and he didn't shun me. He didn't want nothing to do with me, even though I knew I was unpleasant and I knew it was completely uncalled for. So he was, warm and open and would joke around with me, just like he did with the old me, even though I knew it wasn't the old me. Talk about that a little bit, Georgie.
Well, I just felt compassionate for Erika because I could tell that she was struggling, and my heart went out to her, and I was drawn to being kind rather than taking it personally
Or getting concerned.
Or getting concerned. And that's the other thing that is, I didn't get concerned about her. I could see beyond what she was going through. And as a result, I just was able to take it in stride. And if she got upset or angry, I was able to take that in stride too, because I felt, kindness towards her. And to me, that's the key, is that neutrality and that ability to take your experience in stride rather than reacting to it. I mean, it seems really simple, but to me, that's at the heart of it. And if I did get upset or react to it, I would apologize and say, "Gee, Erika, I'm sorry that I was annoyed with you." So I would see it as me reacting to her rather than just I don't know.
Yeah, an example of that, like he might come into my this happens a lot with my kids over the teen years, is that he might come in my room and say, "Hey, I'm going down to, I'm walking down to the corner. You want to come down with me?" And I'd be stressed and agitated and I'd want to be left alone. And I'd kind of bark at him.
Yeah.
Like, "I'm busy. Can't you see I'd bark at him. Like I did not want to be bothered. And he'd say, "Well, I'm just asking you, I give a guy a break. here I'm asking you if you want to do something, he might get, offended or annoyed, or here he's
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
do something. Um, here he is asking his unpleasant daughter to join him on an otherwise
yeah,
nice walk to
yeah,
the store. And,
yeah,
and, and so he'd get, irritated and kind of bite back. And then I'd feel really terrible and, cry or hate him or something. And then he'd come around later that day or the next day and would say, look, I'm sorry. I don't know what was wrong. I kind of, you clearly wanted to be left alone. And I would kind of, sort of was intrusive. And then I got in your face and, I didn't realize you were going through something. And I kind of, I wasn't very nice about it. Um, he, he apologized as if I had said no thanks, and he got irritated.
yeah, yeah,
And it kind of, I really felt that he was only interested in his reaction to me.
yeah,
He didn't really justify his reaction. He treated me just like he would any decent human being. And I really, it the other part of it is that I could tell that he felt he was trying to be in service to me.
yeah.
That
Yeah,
that was the part of
my
it that,
heart, my heart was in the right place.
right. He wasn't
Yeah,
trying to fix me, and he wasn't trying to save me, and he wasn't judging me. He was trying to do something helpful at that point in life and had no idea what that looked like. So
yeah,
he'd invite me places, he'd hang out with me. I could tell that he was sort of hanging around to see if there was anything he could do, and he would try things. And then when
yeah,
it didn't work, he'd say, oh, sorry about that. And the things that it would work, like he'd take me to basketball games. I like that. There were things that he could take me out to get food.
yeah,
So there was things that he would try that worked. And the rest of the time he was kind of shooting blanks, but I could feel that he was doing what he could, and I could feel the respect that I deserved just as much consideration as somebody pleasant.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that
You,
stood
you
out
could
to me.
you could tell that if nothing else, that my heart was in the right place.
Hmm. And that's often George and I would fumble around, and still do, teenage clients that come in, maybe they're mandated, they have to come in, or they want to come in, but they don't quite know if they trust you yet. So they're going to kind of, you know, just hold their cards close to their chest. And so you don't want to be intrusive, but you
Yeah,
say, what can I help you with? And you're trying to figure out how to get some traction with them.
yeah,
They can feel that you don't know what you're doing, and you're not doing a very good job, but you're trying.
yeah, yeah,
Trying part is the only thing that matters.
yeah,
It was, and that's really what this talk is about. It's in our combined 50 years of working with teenagers and parenting teenagers, the trying part is the only thing that you have to bring. I
yeah,
want to be in service, and I'm not sure what that looks like. It's the part that teenagers feel. They don't really care if you're good at helping,
yeah,
or they don't care if you're a practitioner and you have no good answers or insights or profound things to say. They actually just want to feel that somebody stopped and is in their corner.
yeah,
And that was the part of it that somehow had a sort of a calming, reassuring effect on me, that I don't know what happened to me and I don't know what to do about it, but someone's in my corner.
yeah.
Someone
Someone's on
here.
my someone's on my side.
Right. And
Yeah,
so far, they don't seem to know what to do with it either. It
yeah.
didn't matter to me.
Uh,
Now, let me just talk a little bit about what the other side of this is. And I'm going to share Linda, so Linda's my stepmom. She was with us since, well, I was, I think, 4, 6,
Yeah.
really young. So she was there all along. And she was part of our discussion last night. She's comfortable with me sharing this. She did not, I freaked her out.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about that a little bit because it's part of the landscape. If you're human and you have kids, or you're a practitioner, or you work with teenagers, you're going to be sometimes George and sometimes Linda. Maybe a lot of Linda, a little of George, maybe the other way around. So what was interesting is that Linda would get concerned about me, like, what happened? She
Yeah.
was fine, and then she wasn't. And in that space in between, seemingly nothing happened. Just went in one door and out the other, a completely different person, as if I went into the restroom and came out the other door and I was different. She was sort of it. She was concerned. She was sort of judgy, and well, she's really hostile towards us, and we're just trying to help her. She just clearly wants to be left alone. She'd get offended. She'd get insulted. She'd kind of feel unappreciated. So, which are all normal things. But, what was interesting is she said, if I had been willing to look stupid, and if I had been willing to get lashed out at, I would have hung in there with you
Yeah.
and tried to be of service. I would have tried a different way. I would have, you know, I would have been able to find my own neutrality sort of through, I would have fumbled my way through the neutrality and trying things until I could find something, a feeling where we could connect, where you'd feel like I'm in your corner,
Yeah.
or some way we could spend time. But she said, I didn't, she was afraid of my hostility. And she said, I wish I could see past my state. She wished that she could see beyond the state that I was in.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what you get good at over the years, working with teenagers. You don't even have to be doing it very long to be able to look past the sort of presentation, the the emotional state, to look past it and see what else there is. You know, I'll look at some questions here in a minute, but Georgie, I was thinking one of the things in our culture, one area in which people are really good at doing this as adults is, when someone's grieving,
Yeah.
we're in terms of being comfortable with emotions, which people typically aren't comfortable with big, and unpredictable emotions in people. We're surprisingly comfortable with grief.
Yeah.
We can hang out with somebody who either just lost somebody or just broke up with their got divorced or broke up with a boyfriend, and we can kind of overlook their being sullen, crying randomly,
Yeah.
being bitter or dark. And sometimes we know, okay, I'm going to sit and listen to them and talk about it. Sometimes we know I'm going to change the subject. I'm going to keep it light. I'm going to distract them. We kind of get there's this process that's happening, and it seems to come and go. and I'm going to hang out. And at some point they'll come out the other side. So I don't even really need to help them. I'm
Yeah,
just in service to them while they're going through something. We're adults, understand, are good at looking past people's packaging and unpleasantness or
yeah, yeah.
the unpredictability. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And, and, and it's really neat that they don't take it personally. That's the key,
Right,
is when people don't take things personally, they live in a very different world.
right, right. They don't get offended like, well, here I am showing up and all you're going to do is talk about your ex-husband.
Yeah, yeah,
They don't, we don't, we're kind of okay with whatever they're doing in there as if it has nothing to do with us.
yeah,
And yet we know we're there out of being in service, even though we have no idea what to do to move the dial. We're comfortable just showing up and being support, even though we have no idea what form that should take. So we just kind of show up and I don't know, tell me where to stand.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
Tell
that's
me to stand. Yeah, that's the feeling of it.
exactly, that's that's essentially what we do with teenagers.
Yeah,
Kind of everyone, we start from scratch and like, wonder what I should do. Do I ask them, you know, what's on? Do I ask them about do I bring it up? Do I let them bring it up? Do I ask them about other things? Do I let them talk? Should I stick with this topic? Seems like they're going very dark. Is that good? Do I change? Are they getting it out? Do I change topic? We're constantly sort of looking at, it's almost like a ball game.
well, you know what,
Conditions are changing.
we're looking at the lay of the land.
Right,
That's another way to say it. We know that it's all in seeing in the lay of the land.
right.
So
That's right.
that's what we're really good at as as a counselors. Uh, if we can see the lay of the land, it really helps us.
Right, right. Okay, so let me take what George just said and show you what that looks like. You know how in the beginning we said the biggest thing you could do for an adolescent is to understand their world.
Yeah,
Well, that's something that's the difference in what George was doing versus Linda was doing is Linda would look at our relationship. Well, does this mean we're not going to have a relationship anymore? What happened to all the relationship we used to have? She'd look at sort of the personal side of it.
yeah,
And whatever was going on with me sort of disappeared. It wasn't something she was interested in anymore. She was busy moving away from it or thinking about how it affected her, what it meant to her. Um, and what's interesting is that, then later when she, I was out of it, she could say, well, so what was going on with you? Then she got interested in the lay of the land.
yeah,
Like what was happening inside your head? And that's what George didn't really ask me. Well, he tried a few times, which just made me cry or feel completely misunderstood. But he was interested in what was going on with me, in what I was reacting to, what I was upset about, what was scaring me. I knew that because he was interested in being of service and he was hanging in there with me to try and see what he could do, he was sort of, in a way, he was getting to know me.
yeah. I was getting to know you. Yeah,
And what happened is when I felt ready to say, I'm struggling, will you help me? I knew he'd be interested.
hmm
so he didn't even have to ask me, can you tell me about the lay of the land, for me to feel that he was interested in my world and what was going on in it.
Yeah.
That being of service and wanting to be there for me and wanting to understand me was what I felt from him. And I was interested. As soon as I got to the point where I wanted help, and I went to him and said, look, I need help. I'm doing really badly. He didn't try to teach me anything. He just said, well, what's going on? It was all 100% interest.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look at a couple questions that have come in to see how this is settling in here. What a question! This is a great question. So, with this understanding of how they feel and think, do you share this with them, or just know it as we try to interact?
Well, that's a good question.
That is a really good question. I generally do very little talking. I do as little talking as I can. The only thing that I say is to try and get them to talk.
Yeah.
So I don't, primarily because they're so troubled that they don't really care what I'm doing or thinking. And they don't care how I fix them as long as I do it. So I find that they really want to be listened to. So I don't tell them much. Personally, I don't know about you, Georgie, but.
Well, the other thing that I was going to say, Ari, is all of this is in the context that you don't have to worry about the kid.
Right.
That's the context. So given that you don't have to worry about how the kid's doing, you have a lot of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So now the reason I say that is down the road, you're going to see them come out, whatever they were wherever they
Whatever they were going through.
Whatever they're going through.
Right.
So that gives you the confidence that you don't have to worry about them, because they'll come around at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very reassuring for parents, that to know that at some point their kid is going to come around.
Right. Yeah, and I think I want to highlight that we said that with the very first clients we worked with. We're not just saying that because they've all come through things and every problem is survivable. We say that because we're that way.
Yeah.
And they're built with the same software that we are.
Yeah.
There's things that we went through, and then we came out the other side.
Yeah.
So there's a part of us that, and that was one of the things that I could feel from George, and one of the things that I feel when I sit with clients is we're just seeing whatever they're struggling with now, and they'll have, maybe with our help, maybe not, this will be a problem that's in their rear view mirror down the line, and we're just looking for ways of teaching them about their health along the way. We're using whatever problems they have just as an example of how problems work, so we can teach them a little bit about what their their resilience that they're born with, teaching them about thought. We're just sprinkling, using the things that we're helping them with as sort of a way of pointing to how thought works.
Yeah.
We don't have to teach them anything so that they can handle these things. That's the difference, is that we're not installing anything in them. We're essentially
We're highlighting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We're highlighting. Like I'm working with a teenager right now who's worried about, she's concerned about what she's going to do next year for school. And she's like, I only have two options. I don't like any of those options. And I don't know how we got on it, but we were talking earlier in this session about friends, and she had a set of friends that she sort of grew out of. They were just really sort of they were mean to people, and they were into gossip, and she kind of used to be like that, but she's like, it's really hurtful, and I don't want to talk about that anymore. And then I'm worrying about, is it going to get back to them? Is it going to hurt their feelings? She said, I think I just grew out of them. And I said, you look like if I keep these friends, I'm going to feel terrible about myself every day, or I'm going to have no friends. Like, I didn't look like I had any options, but yet you found your way through that.
Yeah.
And she said, oh no, that's true. I did. And I said, so you'll find your way through this. So there's something that happens inside you, that the stuff you're working on, you just haven't seen your answers yet, but they're in the oven. At some point they'll come out and they'll be ready. And that was, I'm not worried about her and what she's going to do about next year, because we're able to work things out for ourselves. We're just here to loosen things up a little bit. Yeah. And help them get in a little bit more of a reflective state a little more often, understand what they have going for them, to use it a little more deliberately. But we're not worried about their having what it takes to get through what they have to get through.
Yeah.
What allows us to kind of sit back and just, kind of mess around with how to be of service to them and how to connect to them and what could be helpful. Do we talk? Do we not talk? We don't feel intense about, I got to make sure I do the right strategy. So yeah, we could be. Well, go ahead, Georgie.
Well, what I was going to say, Ari, that there's not a lot, there's not a lot of riding on what you do, because I don't know how to say it, Ari.
Yeah, you're sort of, we're in a way, our only job is to stay in the spirit of being heartfelt and interested,
yeah,
and open with them, and to show them what they have going for them.
Yeah.
So that they can have the same faith in themselves working things out that we do. So time is on our side. I don't know if that's what you were pointing to. Like,
I like that, Eric. Time is on our side.
Right. So we really don't have to provide them with anything short of, we're just pointing out some of the pre-installed software that they already have.
Yeah.
We're pointing out that it looks like you only have two paths and both of them look like dead ends. That's what being discouraged, that's what being in the trenches looks like. It's an appearance of, you don't have any options. We're pointing something out that they're already experiencing, and we're pointing out that they're an answer machine, like in ways that they've already experienced.
Yeah.
They're a problem machine. They're also an answer machine. So it's not on us to do anything spectacular with them.
Well, let's let's go to another question.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I, one of the questions we got is, are preteens a lot like this too? I'm a teacher. I work with 9 to 10-year-olds. I've seen a lot of them behaving like they have a problem file, as you mentioned. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, preteens, anyone, kids over, 8, 9 years old. It's often it's getting younger. Teens are getting hormonal younger. I don't know if it's the hormones in the milk. They say there's theories about that. That that they just get sort of emotional and destabilized and out of whack chemically, hormone wise earlier. It seems to be the trend, but regardless, at some point it kicks in, and oftentimes it's when they're not even teens yet. They'll get emotional out of nowhere. They'll get moody. They feel close to you, and if you're a parent, or a teacher, one year they're really sweet, and then the next year they're surly and hostile and antagonistic. And the summer went by, and that was it.
Yeah.
So they're anyone's susceptible. They're susceptible at all ages, and so it's the same thing happening. They just, I think it's kind of like the young snakes using all their venom. They don't have any experience with the sort of emotional toxins that they get. They don't know how to handle them. They've never had them before, so they're very clumsy, and everything happens in large amounts starting 8, 9 years old. Now, one of the other questions we got is so somebody's asking, I have an 18-year-old client referred to me by his mom. He's suicidal. Stuff coming out about his sexual identity. The first couple sessions he opened up, but then he wasn't talking as much. Asked if he's okay. His mom says he's struggling at home, but he hasn't spoken with her. So she's wondering, did I do something wrong? Do I do anything different? Should I, how do I make adjustments given that things seem to be going fine and then they weren't? This happens with us a lot. Thank God things were going really well, and then all of a sudden they shut down, or they stopped coming, they stopped responding. And in a way, back to George's point earlier, is you want to feel comfortable with the fact that this is sort of like art. It's sort of experimental and exploratory. We don't know what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
Sometimes a teenager will get really open and be willing to let thoughts in because they're with you and you're interested, and they get reflective, and what they see freaks them out. Like, I know one of our colleagues, Kathy Casey, works in the jails, and she teaches the inmates about thought, and they get in this feeling they're not getting judged. They're in this class. Kathy really likes them, is joking around with them. They feel kind of like normal civilians again, and they relax. They go back to their cell, and all of a sudden they feel enormous remorse. Their conscience kind of moves in on them, and they come in the next class and they say, what happened to me? Like, I've never felt worse in my life. And what that is for them, I don't know about for this teenager, but it's when people's heads clear, and they get more stable, their wisdom comes in. If they did something bad, their conscience is going to come in and say, look, you hurt this person. And for the first time, they really are honest and let in memories that they were too unstable to let in, too shut down to let in. And that's, you know, what Kathy said, look, that's your wisdom, your stability. Your mind wouldn't have brought that in if you weren't ready for it. And so sometimes that's what happens with teen clients, is they let something in and they have to kind of work it out themselves in the privacy of their own mind, or maybe it scares them and they don't, you know, they're not sure they want to go back and do that again. My point here is that any change is good.
Yeah.
And you can't, I don't know that you can do it wrong if your heart's in the right place.
Yeah.
And you just show up open and in service. Even if they, you know, they get mad at you and fire you. I don't know that I would do it any different. I mean, I might look and see, well, could I have done something different? But until you can see how to do things, you know, until you can understand what happens with somebody, you don't get to know that. And I think you're, you know, the operating principle is the same, in that you want to be able to, the thing we're pointing to is the feeling of being in service is part of it we're highlighting. And the other part of it we're highlighting is that you're not afraid of what they're going through, even if they're harming themselves, they're suicidal.
If you can see past it, that's the key, is
Yeah.
if you can see past what they're going through, then you're going to be confident that you're in a position to help them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the line of demarcation.
Right.
Can you see past what they're going through?
Yeah, you know, this is where I'll go back to what I said about grief. You know, when you're with somebody, if you've ever been around somebody that's grieving and you felt like sometimes that freaks people out, but if you've been around somebody that's just broken up with someone, or they're in a midlife crisis, and you're not, or they've lost somebody and you're not afraid of what they're going through, your natural human instincts, your understanding of people that you've gained from all your life experience will give you ideas about what to do.
Yeah.
That are perfect. So you might distract them. You might say, let me, you know, let's get some pizza. Let's get the dog in here. Let's, or you might talk about it. So you do the same thing with somebody who's hurting themselves, who's suicidal, is you might say, look, I don't want to talk about that. Let's get them talking about other things. All they do is have people ask them about that. You'll know if it's better to get them talking about areas where they're more stable and you can get to know where they have their health and their clarity. Or you'll have a sense of, well, let me ask them about that. You know, are you worried about yourself? You might talk to them about, you know, everybody gets low. A lot of people are suicidal at your age. Let me, you know, adults are suicidal. They don't tell you, but you know, you might steer right into it. And there's again, it's art. It's nothing, there's no formula for it.
Yeah, it's art. Yeah.
But you get informed on the things to try. You get inspired to do things, not as a practitioner or even as a parent, but you get informed by just your life experience with people, what you understand about people, what works for you, what works for your friends. You just, if you see them as just a person that's struggling, and you don't have a bunch of thinking about, oh my God, what happened? They're so different than they used to be. What's wrong? I gotta fix them. If you can get yourself quiet and out of that noise and just into the moment, into, I'll muck around, let me try things. The feeling of your creative process will get more lucid.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just get a little bit more, you just get experimental with them. Like, look, we're in this together. We can't mess this up. If you try something, it goes really badly, you know, they get mad at you or they get shut down. You take a different tact.
Yeah.
And behind it, even if you're clumsy and not doing well, or you bring up something and realize that was a mistake, they feel you're trying to be in service, even if you suck at it. It's the only thing I wanted as a teenager. When my kids struggle, it's what they want.
Yeah.
I'll say to them, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, tell me what I should be doing. Should I be doing? Should I leave you alone? Do I hang out? They can feel I'm trying to hang in there, but I have no idea what that looks like. They really, when you're the person struggling and someone shows up like that, tell me where to stand. It's the best kind of reassuring. It's the best kind of help.
Well, let's go to what
Yeah.
another question here.
So I got this question that so one person is asking, has it been your experience that teens are often easier to work with than adults? Are they more open-minded to the solution you point them to? Adults seem to be, clamoring for techniques. Your experience with the difference of readiness for a different way of going about bringing about well-being. It's interesting. One of the reasons that I love working with teenagers is because especially for people out there that are trying to become practitioners or that are trying on the idea of, either being a teacher or a therapist or a coach themselves, teenagers will hone your skills faster than any other demographic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I say that for two reasons. One is, in a way, they're totally not open because their mood state is so loud that they can't show up sort of professionally the way that adults do. Like adults get, like, I got to go to a doctor's appointment. It doesn't matter that I just got served divorce papers. They show up and they do the doctor's appointment. Yeah. The teenagers they have no idea how to do that. Whatever's happening, it just
That's great.
hijacks their world.
Yeah.
So if they're self-conscious or awkward, they are super awkward. They're not kind of awkward. They're 100% awkward every second. If they're uncomfortable, if they don't want to be in there, if they're depressed or angry, they can't even hide it. So in a way, they're terrible listeners, at least initially, because they're so consumed that you're like a footnote on their experience. But what that requires of us, just like it did with George, he kind of was like, okay, he was just kind of, bobbing and weaving and trying to hang in there with me.
Yeah.
It got him really good at hanging out with me, so that, the 10th hour of hanging out with me was much easier than the first hour. With teenagers, it's exponentially faster. With clients, you sort of, you sort of get, if this person's troubled, I'm going to try and hang in there with them and not get discouraged and not get in my head about it. You really learn how to essentially get present and get in a state of being what we talked about earlier, heartfelt. You learn how to do the heartfelt part. And then what that frequency feels like, what that feeling feels like over the concern, the pressure to save them or say something profound or fix them. You sort of learn what heartfelt, that's a lane you can drive in. And when after you've worked with a handful of teenagers and you see that they've completely checked out when you go into trying to teach them or talk to them, you have to get into heartfelt for them. You have to get in the moment and in a feeling of being in service. It's the only feeling left once you've tried everything else. It's sort of the going back to the drawing board feeling.
It's almost like you're saying, okay, I give up. I have
Right.
be heartfelt.
Exactly. I've tried everything else.
Tried everything else.
The concern, because it does feel like if I get really intense or really committed to helping them, I can or really say everything I know, it'll work, and then it doesn't. So there's nothing left but to get into the being of service. So that's one of the reasons I think everybody should work with a couple of teens or go out and talk to teens.
Yeah.
If you have kids and you want to get better at connecting to them, or you want to be a coach, or you are a coach practitioner, it hones your skills. And the other part of that, though, is that when they feel that you're for real, you actually, like when I felt like George hung in there with me, even though I barked at him, or I was unreceptive to his good-natured, heartfelt side. I was sort of didn't let, I was hard to reach because I was used to putting people off, and I figured, well, it's just a matter of time before I put him off, and he wasn't put off.
Yeah.
What happens is once they hang in there when everybody else hasn't, my guard drops faster than adults. And when a teenager's guard drops, they are open like no adult. They're just like George was talking about, younger kids, they're so easily affected. If you're tense or hyper or freaked out or goofy, they are right there with you. Teenagers are like that. If you're in their corner and you look like you care, they'll get really honest and really open, and they learn so fast because they don't have a lifetime of ideas and beliefs about whether people are resilient or strong and whether they're broken. They're all in with you the way they're all in with hanging out with their friends.
Yeah.
In a way that adults aren't. Because adults are kind of in with you, but they're not really sure if what you're saying matches the 65,000 other things they know. So it's in that sense, teenagers are really different, in my opinion, in the best of ways. Good questions, you guys. Georgie, what thoughts do you have? Any thoughts you have wanting to add?
Well, I like what we're doing, Ari. I think this is really good that we're doing this. But I'd like to go back to, I guess, a vision for how easy it could be if we follow the lead of the kids.
Say what you mean by that.
Well,
you guys know what you're talking about.
It seems to me if we don't think of ourselves as teaching them something, and if we just think of us following their lead, it's a game changer.
Right. Let me.
So if we have the humility to follow their lead, that I think that's important.
Yeah. And let me comment on what he's talking about. We don't mean you hang out and let them run the sessions, or we mean that you taking your cues from them.
Yeah.
That you're in there as sort of the mad scientist trying to, let me get them talking. Let me see what they're interested in. What makes sense for this person? What am I, that you're sort of, let a couple ways of letting them lead. One is you're listening for
You're listening, yeah.
What they're up against, so that you can understand the world through their eyes.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing to have to point out, but sometimes we get so into helping them that we forget to see if what's going on with them is what we think. we don't even, oftentimes we're off running trying to help or fix them, like our own kids. We don't even really understand what things look like for them. So part of that is letting them lead, in that you want their landscape to be what you're calibrating to, what
Yeah.
you're looking at, what you're considering, what you two are taking on is the world through their eyes. And the other thing is that you want them to lead, and that they already have resilience and clarity and wisdom. So a lot of, for everything that they get caught up in, there's a lot of things they handle gracefully that other
Yeah.
people don't. That's one of my favorite things about working with teenagers. There's struggles, like social struggles, they handle far more gracefully than most adults would. I know that I would. Mean kids, and there's so much that they don't take personally, and there's so much that they just, well, my dad's just this way. He's violent and unpredictable, and he's never there. They don't even really think about it. It's just something, it's part of the landscape. So you let them take the lead, and that you're listening for how do they already see things without taking them personally.
Yeah.
How do they, what's their wisdom look like? Where does their calm look like? How do they already see how thought works? So that you're just connecting the dots from one area where they have perspective to an area where they're missing perspective.
Yeah.
Which is really different than I have to provide them with the goods.
Well, I think, Ari, if I'm not mistaken, I think our time is up.
I was just gonna say, so we'll wrap up here, but I'm guessing at some point we'll do another one of these, and I want to thank everybody for coming.
I'd love to do another one, Ari.
Yeah,
I love working with you.
me too. I love just preparing for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when we prepare for things like this, we stop and look back at, all right, 20 years, what have I learned? We kind of do it from scratch every time. So it's, for us, it's really fun to do. It's fun for us to work together, and you guys are such a captive audience.
Yeah.
Or you're really polite. I'm not sure, one of the two.
Yeah.
If we bored you to tears. I'm
right.
putting in the chat, if you're interested in seeing what we're up to, I just put in the chat links to trainings we're both doing. I'm doing one specifically on working with teens. George and Linda Pransky are doing one on professional training for practitioners working with any kind of clients. I've sat in on a number of their trainings, and they're just sensational. Every single one is different.
Oh, thanks, Ari.
Yeah,
that's a strong endorsement.
Well, you'd think after, listening to you guys and hanging around with you guys professionally for 20 years, I'd get bored of what you say, but you guys always say something different, just like we're always saying something different in these. So anyway, I know I'm biased, of course, but I can't recommend their trainings. They're so good. So anyway, so that links in the chat there, and if you guys are interested, and otherwise, thank you for your attention and your interest and enthusiasm for getting this learning out there and getting into young people. That makes us happy.
And let us know if you want us to do a part 2.
Yeah, reach out to one of us. And
if you're thinking, oh, I think I'd like to have them do a part 2, just let us know.
Yeah, send our office, send one of us an email, and maybe we'll put another one on the schedule down the line. But look, Georgie, you can't see these, but there's all these thank yous. Anyway, people are thanking us left and right. So anyway, All right, you guys, we'll have a good evening. For those of you in Europe, have a good rest of the day, you guys. And Georgie, nice hanging out with you as always.
Oh, Ari, it was my treat.
All right, you guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.